All right, ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Welcome back to Let's Talk Racism Island. I am your host, Harrison Paul. As you can see, by the grace of God, we have a new setup, and it's 2024, so we're just gonna get serious about this. Dr. Umar said it, and I'm gonna repeat it. 2024 is about organizing. If you're not organizing something, if you're not pushing and moving forward, you're not important. So that really inspired me. It was one of his Instagram lives. There's many Instagram lives. And shout out to our big brother, Dr. Umar. And today we're going to get into a video that I was watching, came up on my Twitter this morning. And I was like, I need to get on this instantly. So we got our brother, I think it's Cameron. Our brother Cameron, he got a podcast going on. And he starts talking about how Africans don't even mess with us. Cameron says he considers himself to be Black American, not an African American. And I said, I got to touch on this. So, actually, for the sake of the people, let's watch this.
We don't even got to go into the license. When you go fill out a test when you're in school and they ask you this, that, and the third, this, that, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be totally honest with you. And I know we got to get back to our topics. We already a few minutes in. I'd rather feel in Black than African American. Because Africans don't even fuck with us.
Wow.
Because they don't.
And Americans do?
Well, you're American, Mace. You're born in America. When you go to the Olympics, and when I say African American, you go over there, they call us Yankees and all that. They fuck with us, but we're not from the motherland. We're from America. So I'd rather say I'm a Black American. When we go to the Olympics as a country, and somebody Black is fighting from the United States, you don't say African American, you say American. You don't even put a color on it. It's an American fighter fighting a European fighter, or China or Japanese or anything. You're known in the Olympics as an American. It doesn't matter what color you are. You're an American fighting against somebody from Cameroon or Senegal, whatever. The point being is they don't categorize it when it's world competition, but when it's other shit, it needs to be categorized. So I consider myself a Black American. I don't consider myself African American. And shout out to all my niggas in Africa. Much love. But y'all don't consider us real Africans. Y'all don't.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there. And one of the most things that's important to understand is, I always have these amazing conversations with my mother, and I, as you guys know, I always talk about it. And I think it's so important for me because I get a perspective of the journey and the timeline of Black people from a lady her age and a young man my age, and obviously having been raised in Zimbabwe and then migrated to England and then migrated again to Ireland. Sorry. And then me being born here and raised here, and what that entails. So we're African of descent. So of course, one of the special things that I'll never forget, and like I always talk about, North America was the most special thing for me, an eye-opening thing for me, and I don't think a lot of Irish or Irish. I'm gonna speak for Ireland because that's the place where I grew up, and that's the audience I try to speak to because I understand that condition the best. And when I went out there, I got to understand a lot of people like Cameron, firsthand. And something that we took very lightly growing up in Ireland was having an African surname. That's something that out there, they're actually, because they're deprived of it, they're actually in the deep yearning of that. And I'll never forget when I spoke to one of my homies from the first guys I met, and I asked him, and anybody I don't know is like, if one of the first questions you ask is like, where are you from? You're trying to find out if a person is Congolese, if he's Nigerian, and so you're able to suss out what kind of a guy he is, what kind of character he is, and that's what you do. You know what I mean? Like what's his and what's his makeup? And I remember my homies, I asked him, where are you from? He was like, and I think the question, if I remember that moment so vividly, I was 19 years old. I think the question was also so ludicrous for him that he felt like I was trying to antagonize him. So obviously that's basic knowledge that they don't understand. That now I know that as I'm 27 years old, and I was 19 and not really understanding across the water how, you know, the history of things, again, why we were never really raised, anybody can say word to this in Ireland, to understand the plight of black people. Oh, some of us are poor here, some of us were here, and understand what that entailed. Some of us were slaves, then colonization, the names were taken, and all these kind of stuff. And that's so important, you know. But African Americans have gotten that, you know, and I knew that because I got schooled by guys my age, you know what I mean, about like, you know, slaves and different stuff, you know, and that's culture for them. So one of the things that I noticed was he was quite nervous, this guy who I spoke to, about like, oh, my surname, or and he goes, and I go, where are you from? And he goes, oh, like, I'm from, I didn't ask the son, that's where he's from, because my family from, I think he said Washington or something like that. You know, it's like, you know, that would be like someone in Dublin being like, where are you from? He's like, my parents always been from like Washington, you know? And it's like, oh, or always been from Cork, you know? It's like, not really, but that's how deep it is there. For like, they can only trace back as far as when their family, great grandfather, was dumped on a plant in there and shipped over from Africa. And that was really deep. And I remember then he tried to cover for himself by being like, yeah, but I'm about to check out my ancestry and like and get that checked out because, you know. And I was like, wait, he's wanting to be African? Listen, I'm going to tell you one truth. Irish Africans and European Africans, I believe like African is this token. It's not really something we wear with our chest. And whether you like it or not, like, even especially, I like people who are honest. To be Nigerian wasn't easy for a very long time. Being Nigerian was not easy for quite some time. And I really appreciate the people who can be honest and be like, yo, especially like Burna Boy, like, it wasn't cool, it wasn't lit to be Nigerian, you know? I think I heard another brother say quite recently, like, oh, like, you know, Afro beats. I was watching the podcast from Ireland. Afro beats made me proud to be Nigerian, you know, like when that started to really do its thing, that's when I started to really feel like, you know what, actually I'm proud to be Nigerian. So to watch a brother who was like desperately clasping for straws, of course I'm overly expressing the moment, but we can read things, and he was clasping for straws like, oh yeah, I am, or, and I was like, and that was obviously still going to be naive for quite some time afterwards, but that was something that stuck with me like for some time. Like, wait, first of all, he didn't know where he was from. Second of all, he was embarrassed that he wasn't African. If an Irish African got a chance to say that he was from Cork and it really was Cork, he would jump on that and sit on that. You know what I'm trying to say? So like, you know, I'm from Dublin. If he could really say I'm from Dublin without having to say, okay, I am from Congo as well, or, you know what I mean? Like, that was something he would jump on for real. So that's something but, you know, one of the things as Africans that we need to understand is this, right? When you look at African Americans, and I've noticed this as well from living in Britain, as I'm living here right now, and I interact with Jamaicans a lot, and we all know Jamaicans have been, and they migrated during the I always get this wrong, the Windrush. I think it's called the Windrush generation. Yeah, Windrush generation, where anybody who doesn't know that, there was a time after the World War that the British needed a lot of workers, and they then took a lot of the people who they just abused to come here and work for them, because they were the only people that worked for them. So there's a lot of people who really came earlier, you know what I mean, before it was allowed, you know what I'm saying, when things were very extremely racist. We're like, okay, we are extremely racist, but we need a few of those Negroes because our country is in a bad state, and they became nurses and all sorts of stuff. And so that sense of like close proximity, right? Hear what I'm saying? That sense of close proximity for the amount of generations that does a huge favor. Check this out. The same way Africans, right? There are things, especially Irish Africans, there are things we remember growing up, right? And I'm going to get to Cameron here. There are things we did remember growing up that were very new to us. Our interaction with Irish people and white people was a new thing for all of our families, right? So we were still trying to suss out, even again, I have a brother close to me who was like, you know what, we just came here trying to get our head down, get our life down. And there's a lot of things that we were trying to figure out as we're here. A lot of us grew up with African parents who still have very strong African accents. We are trying to come to terms with, are we proud of that? Are we ashamed of that? You know what I mean? We go to our white friends' house, and their moms talk really fluent Irish accents, and they will sometimes have a laugh, a joke about that. And listen, this is where the condescending racism came in. And so you're struggling with so much things. You know, you're like, oh, should I be ashamed of this? Do I be proud of this? Do I be all sorts of things? Right? And so now this has entailed about whether we worship them, whether everything like that. And it matters so much with, this is what I'm trying to bring out on, like, I felt like what I got from North America was people who've been more in close proximity and have come to a deeper understanding of how to carry themselves as a people. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I feel like that's what I learned from North Americans. Now, this is big. And my mother always mentions this. When she came early, when she was in her 20s, she would work with Jamaicans. Now, she was fresh from Africa, and she'd be working care sometimes with Jamaicans when she first came. She was like late 20s, she said, around that. And she would, you know, and that's because, please help me say this, God. Because Africans, when they came, they were not as much in close proximity, as much. Of course, we had the Zimbabweans, my mother especially, who was, because they settled there, the British settled there, all the sorts, and some Irish settled there, and all this kind of stuff, right? But in terms of that close proximity that you get in places like the West, you haven't got that. Which reminds me of, like, what I'm going to say now is that, did you know what actually sparked the one of the revolutions that happened of Black people to fight for their freedom? Was after the Americans, I think, called them for war, and I think the Africans for a certain war. I forget which war it was. I have to get it. But when they saw that when they went to war, the white man brought his slaves to war with him. When they went to war and they realized and they saw their masters die in front of their eyes and bleed and cry and have fear, that's what sparked the revolution at that time. You know, it was like, wow, they're human like me, because they saw them as a God. To an extent, you know, there is a curse that happens in Africa where they have this, away in Africa, you made it. Anybody would know Europe, you're in America, you're the West, or whatever. And there's a worship for Europe, worship for Europeans, Western America, there's a worship for that. So once we come here, there are certain things that a fresh from Africa will do that we know he's fresh. Why? Because he's still green in a way. He's still bowing in certain moments, but we will now know, and I still believe we're not there yet, we will now know how to throw our weight around that little bit more. Now, when we do the math and we look at our Americans and like I said, the Jamaicans, that woman would look at my mom, Jamaicans who used to work with my mom, because my mom would be trying to do extra work, you know, to show fresh from Africa, show I'm you know, trying to beat all those narratives, you know, I'm competent, I'm hardworking, we're not lazy, I'm not a thief, I'm not a criminal, and you feel like you have to beat all these stereotypes. And they would look at her, and I remember my mom would tell me jokes. She'll say to her, like, kind of side talking to her when they were doing work, we're not slaves anymore. Like, you two pick me, you know, you two trying to get things right, you know, and they'll be like, listen, by now we know, do you understand? So when it comes to Americans and African people who have recently, in the recent generations, migrated, or even, like I said, Britain and the Jamaicans who migrated, they have learned so much from that time, that length of time of living close proximity and understanding, you know what I mean, how to conduct yourself. And I would love African people in Ireland to be humble and not be like, oh no, I know everything, oh I'm fine, I grew up there, whatever. You have to know there's Black Americans who've been there for 50, you know, like not 50 years, like hundreds. Do you know what I'm saying? That there's things that they've developed, there's ways that they carry themselves like, as a Black man, you can't carry like yourself like that on these streets. We think it's because America is violent and there's guns and there's whatever. No, I beg to differ. The Irish African especially is so docile. He's not a threat. He's not a threat. And when I say threat, I don't mean violent. I mean his presence saying, I'm going to make my mark. I'm going to have my say. I'm going to have my place. The next video I'm going to do today, after I do this one, I'm going to discuss as well about the Harvard University president who was forced to resign from her job. And I'm going to discuss about how how big it is that, she was a black woman, how far are we, Ireland, from having our first black Trinity, college, Trinity president, and I want to dive into those things in that next video. But these are the things that, how do they get there? They have fought tooth and nail. That Harvard, yes guys, Harvard, they had to place the black, and don't think it's because why America felt like, listen, it's time to turn a new leaf. Black Americans have been forcing their hand, working hard for generations, and this is, and that's what I plan and I'm passionate about doing when I'm here, is showing or inspiring black people in Ireland how we have to force the Irish's hand. And I even we'll talk about this in another video, but I discuss about how slavery, Irish people were involved in slavery and they got away with a lot because they said, oh, it's them, it's Americans, oh, how disgusting are they, how disgusting, and they've manipulated us to say, you guys don't suffer with that, don't you? And we say, no, yeah, we don't suffer with that, we don't. And then when someone dies, we all protest, oh, we hate this, and it's like, I thought you said you don't suffer with that here. It's because the docileness, we have forced ourselves to be compliant, that we don't know what it is to say no. At the hint of discomfort, I cause uproar. Americans have trained themselves now as a community. At the hint of discomfort, I cause uproar. That becomes, then you are forced, right, to become an individual that carries yourself differently, has less awareness of what white people will think. There's so much, I notice, in Ireland compared to America, awareness of what the white society around us will think about things. So we have our culture, but it is in the rules. It's not obnoxiously unruly and bulldozing through Dublin streets. You know what I'm trying to say? That says, that's when you will see the real rednecks come out and be like, listen, you know what I mean? And that's why you see the rednecks in America come out, and even the white collar rednecks, they come out because these people are a force to be reckoned with. Now, when we talk about why Cameron feels like this, there is this place, and Dr. Umar talks about this a lot, where African people are now trying to replace the African American and the white man knows how to play those two against each other. So he's saying, oh, yes, there has been flaws that's happened within the African American, community. Yes, there has been, right? But they've been fighting a long time. There's been fatigue. There was crack put into the hoods. There was all sorts of things that happened to them. And we hope we stand behind our brothers and sisters there. But now when Africans come to any place, there is this mentality of, I want to hit the ground running. I want to make money for my kids and whatever. And there comes a worship now of like just being in a Western place because you were back in Nigeria or you were back in Congo or you were back in Zimbabwe. Now it's like, I'm going to hit the ground running. And there's a worship. Now when the white man feels, okay, I want to, quite like what he does with the multiculturalism. I'm tired of this Negroes, I'll take an Indian. And I'll make the Negro feel like, listen, I am not racist because look how I'm able to be multicultural with this Asian. And he pins us then against each other. And we all know the Arabs and all those people are probably sometimes our worst in racism towards us because they know they're feeding on that little bit of cheese he's hung there and says, listen, oppress your fellow multicultural brother and sister and I will, you get what I'm trying to say, I'll give you better treatment it all comes to nothing at the end of the day. Now, this is the war that happens, right? Like I mentioned with my mom and the workmates and everything like that. So he's kind of like, look at him. That's what a good Negro does. You guys are all so rebellious. And then now the Jamaicans, I told you, or like the Americans, like, we've been fighting for all this long, trying to show these people that we are not bend over, we will not nothing. And here you come with your energy. Don't think about a scenario, people, where like, I've never had a scenario. Just think about the energy. The energy in general is an unruly energy. That's why I always say this. I love this. When I think about rappers, the baby, big rappers with big personalities, we don't manufacture those type of Negroes in Europe. That's why we always have to wait for what they do. We got the BET Mobile. We got the, everything they do is grander, not because it's a bigger place. That, I love this. Please help me bring this today. That's history. When you see Americans, Black Americans have this grand personalities. And I remember when I went to America the first time and I watched them walk and they got to walk. I'm like, oh, cool, this is not TV. Y'all really like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all really got this guy to, and they've had to throw their weight around and throw shapes because society's pressed them. You know what I'm saying? And they had generations where they bent and they whatever. And so I don't believe even European countries can manufacture figures such as grand as, like, when we look at people like the Baby, or when we look at people like, just think of any American rappers, why we love their culture so much, even the women, Cardi B and all those women, like, of course we don't like the way they conduct themselves, but the character is huge. The personalities are massive, larger than life personalities. This is from society. This is from Bronx. This is from those places. Tupac's mother was a Black Panther. We don't hone in on this. This is why she could manufacture a huge character like that, because his mother was on the street every day saying, fight the power. You know what I'm saying? So these two things go totally hand in hand. And when I study my history as well, being a major hip hop fan, I really felt like I found more of myself in Black American culture, and I understood myself more just merely because they have been fighting the Black plight longer in this society that wants to marginalize our grand and our size, So this, confliction that happens, this conflict between the African and the American African, it's definitely the white man playing both people against each other. Whoever's better will get the best. And then there is that, disconnect as well in regards to, like, what one person has seen and understood, like I mentioned with the war, and seeing the weaknesses in his oppressor. Whereas sometimes Africans can be naive to be like, oh no, if that white person said it, he meant it. He was just being genuine. But at this point, they smile in your face and they behind your back, they're gonna sell you. You know what I'm saying? So there's certain things that the African still has to understand, and I want my Irish Africans as well to understand each other, like understand ourselves better. That don't just say, oh, I'm cool, I'm right, because everyone wants to feel like they can hold their own. There will be a version of you. This is why I always talk about this sense of, like, putting on Dublin accents, and we always force Dublin accent. That I can guarantee you, I put my money on it. After, then let's say 50 years, another lifetime, 2 more lifetimes, probably 2 more. Let's put 2 more lifetimes, right? Which means I have kids, they die, grow up, more kids die. They won't be forcing Dublin accents. They will be of something that they tapped in and understand that, listen, the better your Dublin accent, the more not. So you have to have an unruly attitude that actually is, that's why you had NWA. We just think I just love Black culture, man. I love studying this stuff. We will actually understand, no, guys, we have to make a culture that is disobedient. And what's going to help us to do that is me helping and bringing this information that we are entitled to Ireland. I just made a post on Instagram today. If anybody goes and you'll check it out, you'll see it. The long list of names of Irish people that were compensated from slavery. So do not tell us that we are not entitled to anything in this country. When they decide they could steal generations ago, that generation they took, they stole. They were also, I always mention they were there with my mother in Africa, blah, blah, blah. All plenty of history from there. Now, a few generations later, no, actually, you know what? That was that, and now you're not entitled to anything. Neo-colonialism as well. They're building the civilizations, the West, from Africa, from Congo, and they're going to say, no, that's that, this is this, though. Conor McGregor stands up and says, Ireland for the Irish, and all this kind of stuff. A Negro, you will be allowed yourself to be manipulated if you don't get up and stand up and know your history and say, no, I'm here for a reason. Africa's a rich land that you guys stole from, and we're trying to get out of those webs that you have Africa in, and we migrated here. So don't make me feel like I'm too ashamed now to be here, or I have to ask politely. So yeah, that's for another video. But look, guys, this is I understand my brother Cameron on this one, because there is that conflict between us as brothers and sisters. There is that conflict of experience, and you know, I don't think he means any harm in what he says. Yeah, so they're not stupid. Americans are not stupid. They know their experience. So anyway, thank you for watching this video.
And I'm on a mission for you.